The sun cast golden rays over a picturesque wedding venue where just hours earlier laughter and love had filled the air. Now it was a scene of chaos. A bride, still clad in her pristine white gown, her face a mask of shock and disbelief, standing amidst a flurry of law enforcement officers. Inside the venue, what should have been a celebration of new beginnings had taken a sinister turn. In a private office, tucked away from the elegant banquet hall, a lifeless body was discovered. Blood pooled on the polished hardwood floor. This was no accident, no tragic mishap. This was murder. The details were chilling. The victim was someone integral to the day's festivities, and the weapon, a heavy decorative object from the wedding decor, lay abandoned nearby. As investigators began piecing together the events of the afternoon, whispers of betrayal and a secret affair began to emerge, hinting at a tangled web of lies that had culminated in deadly consequences. What should have been the bride's happiest day had instead become the darkest chapter of her life, leaving everyone to wonder, how did a day of love and promise spiral into violence and death? The answers would prove to be more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Savannah, Georgia, a city known for its cobblestone streets, moss-draped oaks, and southern charm. In the spring of 2023, the city's quiet elegance was the perfect backdrop for an extravagant wedding. The venue, a historic plantation house turned event space, had been booked months in advance. The bride, Allison Montgomery, a 28-year-old marketing executive, had meticulously planned every detail of her big day. She was known for her warm personality, sharp intellect, and a knack for perfection. The groom, Jacob Carter, was a 31-year-old entrepreneur in the tech industry. To friends and family, Jacob and Allison seemed like the ideal couple, ambitious, supportive, and deeply in love. Their relationship was a testament to modern romance, filled with Instagram-worthy moments and a mutual admiration that inspired envy. Overseeing the wedding was Charlotte Reed, the couple's wedding planner. At 35, Charlotte was a seasoned professional with a reputation for flawless events. Known for her charisma and attention to detail, Charlotte had become a trusted confidant to Allison during the months of preparation. To all who knew her, she was the kind of person who could put anyone at ease. The day of the wedding promised to be perfect. The weather was ideal, the guests were buzzing with excitement, and the venue looked like something out of a fairy tale. Yet, beneath the surface of this picture-perfect celebration, tensions simmered, unseen by the unsuspecting bride. What no one realized was that Jacob and Charlotte shared a secret, a forbidden connection that had gone unnoticed by almost everyone. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and as the wedding day unfolded, the truth would come to light in the most shocking and tragic way imaginable. The wedding day began with a sense of excitement and perfection. Guests arrived in their finest attire, admiring the lavish floral arrangements and carefully curated decor that spoke to the bride's meticulous planning. The ceremony went off without a hitch, with Allison and Jacob exchanging vows under an archway of roses, their smiles radiating happiness. The reception that followed was equally dazzling. Laughter, music, and champagne flowed freely. But beneath the surface of this joyful event, an undercurrent of tension was growing. Subtle glances exchanged between Jacob and Charlotte throughout the day had not gone unnoticed by a few observant guests. Yet, in the hustle and bustle of the celebration, no one thought to question it. As the evening progressed, Allison stumbled upon a text message notification on Jacob's phone while he briefly left it unattended. The name on the screen was unmistakable. Charlotte. The message itself was damning, affectionate, and unmistakably intimate. Heart pounding, Allison stepped away from the crowded reception, phone in hand, and made her way toward the planner's private office to confront the situation. What happened next remains a matter of forensic reconstruction and witness accounts. Investigators would later piece together that Allison entered the office and found Charlotte there. A confrontation ensued, but it was Jacob's arrival moments later that escalated the tension. The argument was heated. Voices carried through the thick walls of the historic building, loud enough that a few guests later reported hearing muffled shouting. A crash sounded moments later, followed by an eerie silence. When staff arrived in response to the commotion, the scene they discovered was chilling. Charlotte lay on the floor, unresponsive, with a heavy metal centerpiece, a decorative candelabra beside her, smeared with blood. Allison stood frozen, her white gown streaked with crimson. Jacob hovered nearby, his face pale and his hands trembling. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics pronounced Charlotte dead at the scene, her injuries consistent with blunt force trauma. Allison, though dazed, remained at the venue, her face a mixture of shock and anger. Jacob, on the other hand, attempted to leave but was stopped by police officers responding to the 911 call. Law enforcement quickly secured the area, and guests were ushered out of the venue, their celebrations replaced with confusion and fear. Crime scene tape now surrounded the once beautiful reception hall. The investigation was just beginning, but the initial observations painted a grim picture. 3 people had been in that room. One was dead, one was shaken but alive, and the other seemed desperate to avoid suspicion. The question that loomed was clear: who had struck the fatal blow and why? The answers, investigators suspected, lay not just in the physical evidence but in the unraveling relationships that had turned this day of love into a day of tragedy. The investigation into Charlotte Reed's death began immediately. Savannah PD's Detective Claire Hensley, a seasoned investigator known for her meticulous approach, was assigned to lead the case. From the outset, the scene at the wedding venue presented a complex web of clues, potential motives, and unanswered questions. The initial observations pointed to a crime of passion. The candelabra, found near Charlotte's body, was collected as the presumed murder weapon. Blood splatter patterns suggested close-range impact, and there were no signs of forced entry into the office, confirming that the incident involved individuals who were already present at the venue. Detective Hensley interviewed Allison first. The bride's account was emotional but coherent. She admitted discovering an inappropriate message on Jacob's phone and confronting Charlotte in her office. However, Allison claimed that she had not touched the candelabra. She described the argument escalating between Jacob and Charlotte after he entered the room. According to Allison, she had stepped back, and the next thing she remembered was Charlotte collapsing to the ground. Jacob's statement painted a different picture. He admitted to a romantic relationship with Charlotte but insisted the argument had been solely verbal. He claimed that Allison had grabbed the candelabra in a fit of rage, striking Charlotte in the heat of the moment. His calm demeanor during questioning raised suspicion, an unusual reaction for someone who had just witnessed a violent death. The physical evidence began to take shape. Forensic analysis of the candelabra revealed fingerprints from both Allison and Jacob, further complicating the narrative. Charlotte's autopsy confirmed blunt force trauma as the cause of death, with the angle and force of the blow suggesting an assailant standing close to the victim. Surveillance footage from the venue provided a critical lead. Cameras captured the hallways outside the office, showing Jacob entering shortly after Allison. However, after the commotion inside the office, Jacob was seen briefly exiting the room, pacing the hallway, and re-entering moments later. This erratic behavior hinted at a potential cover-up. The timeline of events was further clarified by statements from staff and guests. Several witnesses confirmed hearing raised voices, with one waiter recalling distinct phrases shouted by Jacob, including a heated declaration, "You've ruined everything." Another staff member described seeing Allison leaving the office after the incident, looking disoriented and muttering, "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." Investigators dug deeper into the relationship between Jacob and Charlotte. Emails and text messages recovered from their phones detailed a secret affair that had been ongoing for over a year. The messages revealed plans to continue their relationship after the wedding, with Jacob promising to end things with Allison after the ceremony. Charlotte's recent messages expressed doubts and frustration, suggesting she had grown tired of the deceit. Financial records provided another layer of motive. Jacob's accounts showed substantial payments to Charlotte in the weeks leading up to the wedding, amounts that investigators suspected were hush money to keep her from revealing their affair. Meanwhile, Allison's accounts painted a stark contrast, showcasing her significant investment in the wedding, unaware of the betrayal unfolding behind the scenes. Detective Hensley meticulously pieced together the evidence. The conflicting stories, fingerprints on the weapon, and Jacob's suspicious movements all pointed to one conclusion. Both Allison and Jacob had reasons to want Charlotte silenced. The investigation reached a pivotal moment when DNA evidence on the candelabra revealed trace amounts of Jacob's skin cells on the base of the weapon. This indicated that he had handled it more recently than Allison, challenging his version of events. Additionally, microscopic blood splatter on Jacob's clothing, not visible to the naked eye, suggested he was closer to Charlotte at the time of the fatal blow than he had admitted. Detective Hensley presented her findings to the district attorney's office. While the evidence implicated both Allison and Jacob, the mounting forensic and circumstantial evidence against Jacob was enough to issue a warrant for his arrest. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the truth of what happened in that office was more tangled than anyone had anticipated. What remained uncertain was whether Jacob had acted alone, or if Allison's involvement ran deeper than her account suggested. The stage was set for a trial that would unravel the final threads of this tragic story. As the investigation appeared to be narrowing in on Jacob as the primary suspect, a surprising twist emerged, shifting the focus of the case and challenging all prior assumptions. A deeper dive into Charlotte's personal life revealed a hidden side to the wedding planner. Charlotte had been keeping a detailed journal, found tucked away in her apartment during a search by investigators. The journal chronicled not only her affair with Jacob, but also her mounting frustrations with both him and Allison. Shockingly, entries suggested that Charlotte had been blackmailing Jacob, threatening to expose their affair if he didn't make significant financial payments. The discovery painted Charlotte not just as a victim, but as someone who had been playing a high-stakes game of manipulation. Adding to the intrigue, phone records unearthed a series of anonymous text messages sent to Charlotte in the weeks leading up to the wedding. These messages were threatening in tone, warning her to stay away and that she would regret everything if she attended the wedding. The sender's identity was initially unknown, but further investigation traced the messages to a disposable phone purchased just days before the wedding. Surveillance footage from a convenience store identified the buyer, Allison. Confronted with this evidence, Allison claimed the messages were sent in a moment of anger but denied any intent to harm Charlotte physically. She insisted that her confrontation on the day of the wedding was meant to be verbal only. However, the revelation cast doubt on her earlier account, raising questions about her true state of mind during the altercation. The plot thickened further when new forensic evidence came to light. A thorough examination of the crime scene revealed traces of blood on a second object, a glass vase on a nearby shelf. Forensic experts concluded that the vase had been used as an initial weapon, causing a non-lethal injury to Charlotte before the fatal blow was delivered with the candelabra. Jacob's fingerprints were found on the vase, placing him at the center of this violent sequence of events. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source, one of the venue's staff members. During a follow-up interview, the staff member admitted to witnessing something on the wedding day, but had initially been too frightened to come forward. The witness described seeing Jacob and Charlotte in the office earlier that day, locked in a heated argument. The argument turned physical, with Jacob grabbing the vase and striking Charlotte. The staff member fled before the situation escalated further and assumed everything had resolved until hearing the commotion later during the reception. This testimony contradicted Jacob's claim that Allison was the aggressor and reinforced the theory that Jacob had been the one to initiate violence. However, it also introduced a chilling possibility. Had Allison walked in on an already volatile situation and decided to take matters into her own hands? As the pieces of the puzzle came together, it became evident that the events leading to Charlotte's death were far more complex than a single act of rage. The evidence pointed to a chain reaction of betrayal, manipulation, and violence, where no one's hands were clean. What started as an illicit affair had spiraled into a deadly power struggle, leaving one person dead and two others under the shadow of suspicion. Detective Hensley was faced with a daunting challenge. The forensic evidence, witness accounts, and psychological profiles all painted a picture of a chaotic, emotionally charged altercation, where both Jacob and Allison had motives and opportunities to strike the fatal blow. The investigation's focus shifted from identifying a single perpetrator to understanding the sequence of events that had turned a love triangle into a deadly confrontation. The revelations rocked the Savannah community, turning what seemed like a straightforward case into a labyrinth of deceit and violence. As the trial date approached, the shocking twists and layers of complexity ensured that the case would become one of the most talked-about crimes in the city's history. The trial of Jacob Carter and Allison Montgomery was a media sensation. Headlines described it as a case of betrayal, deceit, and murder set against the backdrop of what should have been a fairy tale wedding. With both Jacob and Allison charged with second-degree murder, the courtroom became the stage where prosecutors and defense attorneys unraveled the tangled web of events that led to Charlotte Reed's death. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Carla Bishop, presented a compelling case against Jacob. Using forensic evidence, they demonstrated that Jacob had handled the vase, which was confirmed as the first weapon used to strike Charlotte. Blood spatter analysis and the angle of the injuries indicated that Jacob had been close to Charlotte at the time of the initial attack. The prosecution argued that Jacob, fearing exposure of his affair and blackmail payments, had acted impulsively, striking Charlotte in a fit of rage during their argument. Bishop also introduced evidence of Jacob's financial motives, highlighting the significant payments made to Charlotte in the weeks leading up to the wedding. They portrayed him as a man desperate to silence the woman who threatened his reputation and future, ultimately escalating the conflict to a fatal outcome. However, the defense, led by Jacob's attorney, countered with a narrative that placed the blame squarely on Allison. They argued that Jacob's actions, while regrettable, were not premeditated or fatal. Instead, they focused on Allison's alleged involvement, citing her threatening text messages to Charlotte and her unexplained presence in the office at the time of the fatal blow. The defense used witness testimony to highlight Allison's volatile state after discovering the affair. Jacob's attorney painted her as a scorned bride driven to a moment of madness upon confronting her husband and his mistress. They suggested that Allison, not Jacob, delivered the fatal strike with the candelabra in a blind fury. Allison's legal team, in turn, fought to clear her name. They argued that the evidence against her was circumstantial and that her actions were consistent with shock and confusion rather than guilt. Her attorney pointed to Jacob's behavior on the surveillance footage, where he was seen pacing outside the office after the incident, as indicative of a man trying to compose himself after a violent act. A pivotal moment in the trial came when the venue staff member, previously too afraid to speak, testified in court. Their account of seeing Jacob strike Charlotte with the vase added significant weight to the prosecution's case. However, the staff member admitted they had not seen the final moments of the confrontation, leaving the door open for reasonable doubt about who struck the fatal blow. Forensic evidence remained the most damning piece of the puzzle. The prosecution emphasized the DNA and blood splatter found on Jacob's clothing, which strongly suggested his proximity to Charlotte during the fatal attack. Yet, Allison's fingerprints on the candelabra continued to cast suspicion, creating an air of uncertainty that divided the jury and spectators alike. The closing arguments highlighted the emotional toll of the case. The prosecution appealed to the jury's sense of justice, asking them to consider Jacob's actions as both the instigator and aggressor in a situation that spiraled out of control. The defense urged the jury to recognize the ambiguity in the evidence and the possibility that Allison had acted alone in a moment of uncharacteristic rage. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached its verdict. Jacob Carter was found guilty of second-degree murder, with the court acknowledging his role in initiating the violence and his motive to silence Charlotte. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Allison Montgomery's case, however, ended in a surprising twist. While the jury found her not guilty of murder, they convicted her of obstruction of justice for tampering with the scene after the crime. She received a 5-year sentence, suspended after 2 years, with mandatory counseling and community service. The courtroom was filled with a mix of relief and sorrow as the verdicts were read. For Charlotte's family, the rulings brought some measure of closure, though the pain of losing their loved one remained. For Allison, the outcome was bittersweet, a chance at eventual freedom, but with her life forever marred by the events of that tragic day. As Jacob was led away in handcuffs, the weight of the consequences became palpable. The love triangle that had once been a closely guarded secret had unraveled in the most public and devastating way possible. The trial had brought clarity to the events, but it also left lingering questions about the fragile line between love, betrayal, and violence. The case became a cautionary tale in Savannah, a chilling reminder of how easily a picture-perfect facade can crumble under the weight of hidden truths. The case of Charlotte Reed's murder left an indelible mark on the Savannah community. What began as a day of love and celebration unraveled into a web of betrayal, deceit, and violence, exposing the fragile relationships that often lie beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. The courtroom drama and shocking revelations captivated the nation, sparking debates about morality, passion, and the consequences of unchecked emotions. For Jacob Carter, the price of his actions was steep. 25 years behind bars, a stark contrast to the life of success and admiration he once enjoyed. His decisions not only ended a life but destroyed his own, leaving behind a legacy of shame and regret. For Allison Montgomery, her dreams of a future with the man she loved were shattered in an instant. While she avoided a murder conviction, the years ahead would be a reminder of the devastating impact of that fateful day. And then there was Charlotte Reed, a woman who, in her pursuit of love and security, found herself entangled in a dangerous game. Her death became a symbol of how quickly hidden truths can spiral out of control, leading to irreversible consequences. This case posed many questions. Was this tragedy avoidable? Could honesty and accountability have prevented the violence that erupted in that small office? And how do moments of passion or desperation transform people into something unrecognizable? As we look back on this chilling tale, we are reminded that love, trust, and betrayal are forces capable of shaping lives and sometimes ending them. For Charlotte, Jacob, and Allison, the cost of their decisions was irreversible, and their story serves as a cautionary tale for anyone who believes secrets can remain hidden forever. What do you think? Could justice have been served differently? And how far would someone go when love, betrayal, and fear collide? Share your thoughts and join the conversation as we reflect on this tragic case, a chilling reminder of how one moment can change everything.